Welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Bo Peep Talk. My name is Robert and with me is
Peter.
It's great to have everyone on board for this evening. We're going to be looking at and how that's all evolving here in the land down under. We've managed to make worldwide news press with federal government deciding to ban YouTube. Well, not quite YouTube for minors, but censoring it in some way. And we're also going to look at, we'll start with Peter, what's going on in the gaming world, because it seems like this censorship issue is really raising a fury amongst a lot of gamers between Visa and MasterCard being overwhelmed by this movement towards censorship.
Yeah, so what's happened there is payment companies such as like Visa card, Mastercard. So they're the ones, I guess, they're the biggest two. But there's other payment processors obviously that have joined in on this fun, so to speak. They have pressured online gaming platforms such as Steam and other places where you can buy games to remove games from their libraries, and essentially it comes from an Australian lobby group or organisation that actually triggered that I guess pressure to the credit card companies, which they then passed on to the gaming platforms. So basically, with that, a result that happened is these gaming platforms have removed all adult or not safe for work games from appearing in their libraries, and obviously from that there now we have gamers kind of in an uproar in relation to their choice in being able to purchase such content being removed.
So basically, it's not just they're attempting to somehow regulate it. They're kind of just trying to take them off completely. These games.
Yeah. So that's the response that these platforms have done, is remove them. It's just, I guess, to remove any issues when it comes to what the payment platforms have kind of stipulated to them. And basically with that, the idea, and this is the idea now, because I guess the movement that spurred all this on is called Collective Shout. Not sure if people have heard of them before. Basically, they're an Australian-based group that fights the sexualization of women and girls. And from there, they've called on them to obviously do their bits to stop that from happening. So basically, their claim is that hundreds of games have like these contents in there. So includes the depiction of these kind of themes that they're fighting against.
Okay, it's pretty interesting. There's arguments for and against, isn't there? There's always the issue of freedom of choice or the right of someone, but there's also the counter argument in this, Peter, where you would say we obviously don't want underage children accessing pornographic or inappropriate material, and I guess the argument also could be revolve around young people being more likely to be influenced at that age to becoming adults, where then obviously they become citizens, if that's the word to use, that are sexist or racist or violent, and obviously we're trying to avoid that. We do have a problem in this country with the number of domestic violence associated with men. It is a problem. You can look at the data and statistics on what occurs during the Rugby League State of Origin, where the number of domestic violence incidents and calls increases or spikes during these games. But, and I am going to throw here, Peter, we can't dismiss that there are other news events at the moment that are also catching our attention in this freedom of choice, or what our freedoms and rights are. There is the whole movement, and we're making worldwide news with YouTube. And in terms of YouTube, the censorship, if that's the word to use, of YouTube, where there's going to be an ID of some sort required in order to... Now, I believe it's not to view YouTube. It's more along the lines of you won't be able to comment or sign in to YouTube. Is that correct, Peter, on that
Yeah,
particular aspect?
that's my understanding, and which, when you think about it, is in line with what the government always wanted to do in relation to social media anyways. It's not something that I would say is something new, but I mean, it is something new because it's an additional, I guess, platform now that's in the scope of these laws that are put in place. But yeah, it's not anything new because in order to be social, you do need to be online. You do need to be of an age, according to the legislation now.
Are we becoming more, I guess, whether we like it or not, where we're heading, becoming more like China in many ways?
I would say potentially that, well, there is potential to be even worse.
You reckon? You think worse? In what way worse?
Well, look, I will say it's the potential. So, right now, obviously, and if everything that's kind of out in the open for planning passes, we're on the approach to being like China. But it can be, it can go way worse than that, to the point where any thoughts and ideas literally get found out and dealt with straight away as well, because you got to remember everything's tied to your digital ID once they start implementing these things.
See, that's the problem. It's not about how it's initially starting. I think personally, a lot of people, if you were to ask them about the idea of trying to regulate young children and people online, everyone would agree. Having children, everyone would agree. But it's how you do it and logistically make it possible isn't so easy. And obviously, it's going to go down this rabbit hole of digital ID. And this is when it becomes muddied the waters. As you've pointed out, it does sound like a real monitoring then, or it can be. It has that potential to go that way. I've got to be careful because we're all going to hope, and maybe this is being gullible here, that it's not going to be used that way. But there is that capability then. If we all have a digital ID, they'll know, the government or whoever it is will know everything online that we are doing. Now, keep in mind your Googles, your Facebooks, they already are doing that themselves, but they're doing it for themselves for their own benefit, e.g., to keep you online, to keep you engaged so they can pump more advertisements towards what you're interested in, show you videos you're interested in. We know about the algorithm. So they're doing it for, I guess, monetary, selfish reasons, if that's the way to describe it, if you don't like what they do. But when we talk about the government, we are placing a lot more trust, aren't we, Peter, on the government, that they're going to use that data, if that's the word to use, and not use it against, where you get a knock on the door at 10 o'clock at night because your footprint isn't supportive of their narrative, if that makes sense. That's becomes George, what is it, George
George
Orwellian?
Orwell's, yeah,
Yeah,
1984.
in terms of where we're going, the 99. Is that what you're concerned about, Peter? Where we're going to go?
That is like a long-term concern when
Mm.
it comes to this type of censorship. And I say it is censorship, regardless if it's good or bad. It does classify as that. But also, what I'm actually most fearful in the short term when it comes to things like this is it's not the government that actually holds that data, it's third parties. So, which third party is going to be holding all of, say, Australia's data, and what are they going to do with it?
Well, I would counter argue that, but Peter, with that, big companies are already holding our data that we do online. As I've pointed out before, we're relying on these countries. Online has become countries, in my opinion, or we're relying on the likes of Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, who operates on X. Not so much that. Let's go back to Mark Zuckerberg for a moment. I mean, whether people want to like it or not, I can be controversial here. His early days of how he started off and what was motivated to form eventually what we know as a Facebook doesn't start off on, I would consider, virtuous ways. Do you know about that, Peter? In terms of the initial days of, he wasn't called Facebook, of course, when he was at university.
Yeah, yeah. I read that story about it, about the early beginnings,
And
and
I have a problem with that because of, I mean, we all make mistakes when we're young, stupid mistakes. And in this case, he's something that he should have never have done and should be in severe trouble for. But the fact that you have someone like that that has the power to impart on us, well, where he's monitoring us, and the power also of influencing us. See, that's where I have a problem, where you have these individuals that can influence us. And I guess then we're looking at the other side. Do we want that or do we want the government?
well, the thing is, I'll put it to you this way, right? When you, and I won't say you, but when a person signs up for Facebook, or signs up for YouTube, or signs up for whichever service they want to sign up to, right? There's a terms of service that no one really reads, but if you read it, you actually get to see what is kind of expected with everything that happens. Now, essentially, when you sign up and sign in, you're opting in, right? So if you want to stay anonymous, you don't opt in, right? And you avoid that, right? So, but and you can still enjoy the other parts of the internet without that, I guess, kind of being, I guess, tracked and know what's going on. But with what the government wants to do, it's forcing everyone. You have to be you are in, and if you want access to certain types of materials, you have to comply.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting as you're talking and as you're saying this, I'm actually reading the long-winded facebook.com/terms /interesting effective from the 1st of January. There's a fair bit in it. And I was reading about additional provisions and account suspension, how that occurs, disputes. I find that area interesting as an example, okay? So what deems as or what's interpreted as a case for someone to be suspended. And what happens is, since we're on this theme of censorship, is whether people want to accept it or not, it did occur historically. Again, you might not agree with certain people's view online, but they were censored. And I'm giving the obvious example during COVID. And during COVID, there were people that were banned from the likes of YouTube, Facebook, e.g., people that were opposed to the vaccination. Now, it's not whether I support the idea of taking a vaccination or not. It's the idea that even if factually I'm not right in what I'm saying, I should have the right to voice what I feel is right. And as we know, sometimes with information, as more and more information or understanding surfaces, we can be wrong ourselves. And that's why there is a classic saying people will use sometimes, let history be the judge. Let history be the judge. Because that's calling on us sometimes to say, well, how can we be informed? And when we are informed, are we using what we are informed with to do the virtuous and correct thing? Or are we then basing our opinion or our support on our own greed or less virtuous reasons? Does that make sense, Peter, where I'm going with this in
Yeah.
terms of the COVID example? I have a problem with that to this day. I know there were doctors, for instance, that were taken off YouTube. The very president of America was taken off social media.
Yep, yeah. And look, and that's the tough thing when it comes down to censorship, because what I find the most difficult is there are some things that do need to be censored, but then on the same time, there are things that people need to be given the right to make that decision on their own and self-manage that. Now, where does that line, where is that line drawn? That's what makes it really hard.
It is
Uh,
very difficult. It's always going to be blurry and grey. It's very easy when government regulation, censorship, whatever you want to call it, becomes easy and almost black and white if it's dogmatically set or in sync with a religious belief, I believe. Because you can then say, based on faith, we cannot question it. I'm not saying to go this way, of course.
yeah,
We have become secular, okay? More and more secular. So that's why these areas become more and more grey. I guess it's, if for lack of better words, easier when you can anchor enforced, if that's what, because that's what censorship is, enforced restrictions, when you can anchor it towards mystical god or religious tradition ingrained into a book that's considered not to be questioned because it's higher than us or better than us. And so when we lose that, which we have in many, many societies, we have been secular for some time in Western societies, but we've become increasingly more and more loose in this, if that's the word to use. Then there is a lot of openness and talks, and we've seen some very interesting historical turning points, whether that be the BLM movement. We look at all of a sudden there was a movement with Greta Thunberg, with the environment, where even in Australia, people, students and young children were opposed to going to school. There's even a march this weekend about what's going on in the Gaza. So these are, I guess, the right to protest and the right to express or say what you believe. When you go down the line of censorship, you take that away. On all three of those examples that I've just mentioned, it's not about, and I haven't said, and I won't express my opinion or view on the march that's happening in relation to the Gaza, or in terms of the environment and the need for renewable energy to completely replace fossil fuels. I'm not going to give an opinion on that, nor am I going to give an opinion on the example I gave previously in relation to COVID as well. It really doesn't matter. But I do think it matters. Where it does matter is that people, when they feel comfortable enough, and that's, for me, I'm comfortable when I'm with friends and close friends and family to express that opinion. But if I decide I wanted to express that opinion because I strongly and passionately believe on this idea online, I should have the right to do that without fear.
Yeah, but see, you know what makes it, I guess, more and more challenging when it comes to, like, I guess, opinion, and I guess I'm going to classify it as misinformation, right? And
Yeah.
I use that word purposefully, right? So while everyone believes that their opinion is 100% correct, and there's no doubt in their mind that they are correct, that means that there's someone that's wrong as well, right? So um, to go along with, I guess, Schrodinger's cat in that scenario, until you actually prove who's right and wrong, you're both right and wrong at the same time. So this is based on two conflicting points of view, and what makes that hard is once that information is out on the internet, half of it is already going to be misinformation because it's wrong. All right, and you don't know what it is. So some of the censorship that we see coming out is to stop misinformation from going out and having one source of truth.
Yeah.
And that comes back to, I guess, the example that you were using when it came to COVID. The government was clearly wasn't doing the right thing at the right time, based on what has happened and what has come out of it in terms of what we can see from history. But it was never about being right or wrong, or doing the right thing or doing the wrong thing. It was just about to stop misinformation and having everyone do the same thing, because we needed to make sure that, I guess, that people are doing the same things in order to try and stop, what's happening from happening.
But I kind of agree and I don't agree on that, because I didn't see it as dangerous, if that's the word to use. I thought that the government ended up presenting more misinformation than the people that they were trying to control for misinformation. E.g., first of all, you don't need to wear a mask. E.g., yes, you do need to wear a mask. E.g., once you get the vaccination, you'll be completely protected and you cannot spread the vaccination. People perceive those as lies now because, to be quite honest, in defense and support of the government, they were trying to do what they believe to be informed information from health experts. And that goes with the other side that were opposing these views, that yes, you do get outliers, and many outliers, so we can't even use the word outliers actually, that are misinformed, but they were informed. And the government really was saying, no, regardless of whether you're informed or not, we don't want to hear any other opinion or viewpoint. We're going to decide what shapes or forms the narrative.
Yeah, and I guess, look, I don't disagree with what you're saying. Just, I guess, to make it clear. But what I'm trying to argue is, if you have one clear, succinct voice, or having multiple incoherent drips and drabs of information, some is hearsay, some is actually the truth, but they're all over the place, what is more effective? And in cases of emergency, when people are in panicking, you need that kind of clear and succinct, I guess, approach to
Yeah,
things.
but you got to be careful who's doing that in many
Of
ways,
course.
because that can be an abuse of power. That's the what okay, let's go through it. Often with what shapes to become dictators in history. How do they become the dictators, or how do they become in power and never leave power? Out of emergency, out of necessity.
Yeah, that's always the case, and it'll always be the case, right? But that's where it's up to the, I guess, the people to make sure that these situations, the
How?
people
If
who
they're
are
sent,
in how if they're censored, but how did so say for example if you look at what happened with I guess what's an example that we want to use, like if you look at any dictator, they don't last forever, right?
yeah, but
Eventually,
I don't want to live through that. I don't want my children to live through that.
yeah,
You know what
I
I mean?
understand that, but see the thing is right as well, as much as um censorships exist, and using I guess 1984 as an example, they were all, like even there, so they were heavily censored like a population, right? Yet there was still dissidents within the population as well, right? That
What do
was
you, okay, let's look at it this way for our listeners to think about. What do you think the trust in the government is like? Is it at an all-time high, all-time low, or just the same as it's been the past 30 years?
oh look, I would say it's probably the trust is probably the lowest.
That's not good. Why is that? Why are you saying that?
Well, it's like I said, it's history has proven that governments have not always given the best information out.
That's the problem. That's why I'm trying to make a point of this. And we're relying on them to decide for us, which the government's doing at the moment, where they're saying, look, I truly support what the government's trying to do for YouTube and with social media in general. I really do understand where they're coming from. But where I'm struggling with it, which it's becoming more and more of a struggle for us, is the devil is in the detail. The detail's not really out there. And all roads lead to a digital ID. And digital ID, this is where, I can see it being a very good thing, having a digital ID. If you're not doing anything wrong, well, why are you going to worry about a digital ID? But what happens if the government then starts to say, no, hang on a moment, you're not doing anything wrong, but you were reading, we noticed viewpoints that are opposed to our viewpoints that we consider anti-government, and therefore we're going to give you a credit score or credit rating, or that's going to affect your employability, or that's going to affect your ability to receive money from the government. You know where we're going, don't you? We're moving towards communism,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Well,
that's what I worry about.
yeah. Well, places like China already have things like that. Obviously, not like what we're speaking of now, but there's things that are very similar to what you're saying.
And hence that's why there is a lot of resentment with what's going on. It's very, very difficult. It could be a classic example of the idea makes sense, but the practicality of how to deploy or implement this idea in reality might not be possible.
Yeah, but also what makes it worse with things like this. Let's just say you're a young man just turned 18. You're allowed access to adult material, right? This is under this law. Now you start viewing some adult material, right? And as you're legally allowed to now because you've come of age. But your details have been scanned, and it's now known that you've accessed such and such material. Doesn't matter what it is, right? Now, you want to become a politician tomorrow, or someone that's a public facing figure. Let's not forget about being a politician. Let's just say a public facing figure, and that gets brought up what you were viewing 20
Mm,
years ago.
mm.
Like that's inappropriate, and but that's going to happen because we already know that that's happened within social media.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about, like I said, if we oppose the narrative. There are some trends in Australia. This is where I get concerned in Australia at the moment with the government. Example, I might be wrong here, but The Voice, it was unequivocally voted no to The Voice in Australia. True? The Indigenous First Nations
Yes.
voice to Parliament. But then there's examples now, and it has hit the headlines in recent times, where the Victorian government, have you read on this, Peter?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
are trying to bring in their own microwave, if that's the word to use, version of it. Now, that's kind of sneaky, and that's very unfair if that's the case. Now, it's not a case of whether I supported the voice or not. That's not what I'm raising here. It's what the referendum gave. The referendum I thought was a clear no, hence it shouldn't go ahead in any shape or form. But to me, there's a case now where the Victorian government are dabbling or playing on that idea of what what they can do regardless. See, that's wrong, isn't it? And these are the people we're trusting with censorship. See the issue here now? Are they in the right position to have the power to decide what to censor and what not to censor?
No, as far as I'm concerned, if something gets voted against in a referendum and then gets passed via government, I would consider that treason. But that's
Pretty
obviously
scary.
that's not yeah, but obviously it's not going to be viewed as treason because it was passed by government. But that's what it is, because you're going against the people that have elected you in.
Well, this is where there is that distrust in this whole process of the censorship in many ways, that they're starting to build this possibility of, in spite of what's elected or voted, they're going to do what they want. Remember Australian Labor Party, whether they want to accept it, they can play around as much as they want. They didn't win overwhelmingly. They can say they did, but they didn't. The numbers were very low.
I think their primary vote was like 34%.
That's not good, is it? That
No,
doesn't give them that doesn't give them an overwhelming majority to do whatever they want.
well, with the way that the two-party preferential system works, yeah, they've got the seats, so they do whatever they want.
Yeah, I'm aware of that mathematically, of course, but I'm saying that we're talking about here qualitatively. That doesn't give them the right. Australian people haven't overwhelmingly supported or voted for them. They can't use that rhetoric. Maybe on seats it is.
Yeah.
What do you think, Peter? Or am I being unfair and unrealistic to this?
It's what makes it difficult is because it is based on that two-party preferential system,
Yeah,
like voting system, and that's what usually bridges the gap. And look, it can work for or against a party. It doesn't matter which party it is, by the way. It could be the Greens, it could be Liberals, Nationals, Labor, an independent. I don't care who it is. Like, if you're winning off preferential voting, that's not really a win.
well, they're using it that way, the whole $3 million superannuation. And by the way, I think the media misses the point a lot of the times on that. They say, oh, but not many people are going to be in $3 million. They've completely, and it really shocked and surprised me that it took so long. And this might be an example where the media is incredibly biased and really don't want to present the news in this space, where it took them very, very long to realize and recognize that young people today are going to be heavily taxed on their super because they're going to have $3 million plus. I cannot believe that it was not picked up that most young people that are working today at an age from 19, that are 19 today, they're going to have more than $3 million, hence they're going to be taxed. And the other thing, as most people say, what's to say that they're not going to then change it to 2 million or to 1 million? Where does it stop?
Yeah, but they don't need to because, like you said, it's already going to be taxed. I think it even goes up close to 30. If you're almost 30, potentially you could be sitting on a
There you go.
superannuation fund of $3 million.
I went for the 19 because it's the easiest without doing the clear-cut maths example to show that. And I don't understand, and we're talking about censorship, but maybe we need to go deeper, is how reliable and fair the media is. Because mainstream media, I would counter argue anyone on this, does lean heavily on the left at the moment of politics. And the leveler, which is not the best, by the way, but it is the leveler, is Sky News. That's not to say that, if you have any qualms about presentation of a story, your answer and solution is to go to Sky. The answer should be we should be able to go to a balanced view. And people would say, that's what the ABC is. Can I argue there's a lot of evidence to suggest quite the contrary in terms of the presentations that ABC deliver?
Yeah, no, I would say most media outlets are skewing to the left of politics. If you're going to graph it or try to plot where they sit.
And that really puts a form of censorship in its own way, doesn't it? Because you're skewing a viewpoint or an opinion that's heavily leaning a certain way.
Yeah, and that, but look, like that's mainly because that's where the government leans toward as well. Because when you have any form of, I guess, social programs that the government runs, that's already on that left side of politics. Because it's helping to bridge gaps and raise people that don't have as much advantages as other people. So like it does form that left side. So that's why I always say governments, you know.
See, that's where I don't agree entirely when that argument is used that the left side cares about the marginalised, but the right doesn't. Yeah, I think you nailed it best or depicted it best. There are far left and far right. If you look at a more towards the centered left and the centered left, centered right, you would find that it doesn't marginalise groups. Would you agree, Peter, on that?
Well, it tries to be the most equitable for everyone, and with that, I say it's equal opportunity for everyone.
Or it's based on greater reward for greater effort. And to be, without being harsh, it does lean towards capitalism as a form of success in the West rather than a socialist view. And this is very scary because a lot of young people out there don't understand the ramifications of socialism.
Well, see, the thing is, and I'm sure we've spoken about it before. When everyone's the same, right? There's no drive for the individual to perform and achieve. All right. So you will have brilliant minds that don't care, or hardworking people. So they don't actually necessarily need to have a brilliant mind, but people who want to work hard, but they see that they don't need to work hard to be the same as everyone else, so they don't work hard. And it's just waste. So there's so much wasted potential, and because we as humans are like we're rewards based people, like our psyche is based on rewards. We always crave that dopamine hit in our brains. Money is that dopamine hit. You go to work, you work hard, you get paid. That's your dopamine hit for working really hard. When you go to work, right, and work really hard, but then you got a person sitting next to you doing nothing and you're on the same wage, you're not going to work as hard tomorrow because you can see that you're getting the same as him that's sitting there doing nothing.
It's a scary place. It does create, I don't know, it destroys the very fabric of the Australian dream, the American dream. One thing that Americans are particularly proud of, and I think a lot of Americans are forgetting this, is this idea that anyone can, and Americans use this a lot, anyone can become president. Now, I would argue that's not possible now, that capitalism and the evils of that are also up for discussion because I would argue that there are some very, very powerful people that are controlling and making it very difficult for anyone to be able to become president. But that was a dream that was possible in the 50s, 60s, 70s as a result of capitalism. And that goes with Australia as well, in that anyone that's prepared to work, so many migrants came to Australia just with a suitcase, rolled up their sleeves, worked, and ended up finding themselves in a position where they were not only able to look after their family, but look after their long-term future.
Yeah, yeah. And that's something I guess we have less and less abundance of
Mm.
as time progresses.
It's very difficult, isn't it? And it's very difficult because things tend to follow trends and tend to follow America. Now, in America at the moment, for our listeners to consider, there was an election, a major election, and he went to we would say, I don't know if it's centered right. You could certainly present arguments that it is leaning towards or gravitating towards the far right, and that's a scary territory as well when it goes down that path, the far right. Whilst not so long ago, it was leaning the public reaction, thought, the media particularly, towards the far left. But that seems to have changed. And I wonder if that trend will find its way or translate itself to Australia. Now, people will say to me and say to us that that can't be possible because we just had an election. I think that if the right person is being represented on the right, it would have been a very different election.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I think the choice of candidate, or main candidate, is very important.
Yeah, it's very interesting, this censorship, and it'll be very interesting to see where young people and what role they play because so many very, very important causes. When we talk about protesting, Vietnam War is a good example. If there was censorship there, what would have happened? The American civil rights, if there was censorship there, what would have happened otherwise? This isn't an area that young people need to become informed, engaged, and fight tooth and nail if this is taken away, their voice or their opinion or what they can learn about or know about, and not for the government to entirely decide. There is a point, if we look at the YouTube, and I say YouTube because there was always on the card censorship across your Facebook, but I think it bowled everyone over, YouTube being put in the mix. There is something that sometimes is missed in the narrative, possibly. What role does the parent play and take responsibility? There is, of course, the account argument where parents are feeling powerless and don't know what to do, hence need help from the government.
Yeah, when you look at also what's happened, I guess, to the family unit over the last, say, 30, 40 years, in say if you look over the last 40 years, so this is going back to the 1980s, actually, let's go 50 years. If you go back 50 years, when kids went to school, there was still corporal punishment happening at schools. And now from that time, they've removed corporal punishment, and they've made it harder for parents to use even corporal punishment for disciplining their own kids as well. That's not to say that doesn't happen, because I'm sure parents still
But the
use.
government has stepped in other areas, and I don't know where we stand in Australia, but certainly became an issue in America. And I don't know how far exaggerated it was, but where does it sit in Australia, Peter, on the idea of a young person, if they inform or tell someone of their sexuality, is it the school's right they have to report that to the parents and say that the parents know? If a child is considering transitioning towards another gender? Where do we sit on that?
I don't know. That's a good. Well, because that becomes a health matter. I would assume while they're under the age of 16, that the parents should be made aware. After that, they don't need to.
The reason why I asked that, that's an example of censorship in its own way, isn't it, really? The role of the parent, because you've brought that up. And it has been a conversation or an issue brought up in the States where that sits.
Yeah, but see, I look at it as a medical issue. Because gender, like in terms of medically speaking, so this is taking emotions and feelings out of the question. All right. Gender is something that can be defined scientifically, right? The fact that AI can determine a gender based on the iris when it looks at the eyes, that tells you something, that there is a scientific explanation for genders. Um, so that's why I say that falls under medical, and that's something that should be, like, the parents should be informed of.
Well, from the Education Department, New South Wales, the issue should also be discussed with the student's parents or carer unless the principal believes on reasonable grounds that it is not in the student's best interest to do this. For example, a court order has removed a parent's parental responsibility for that student. That
Oh
that
yeah, that
makes
makes sense.
sense.
Yeah,
That
that
makes
makes sense.
sense. Yeah, it does. Yeah, but I've only raised that because obviously this is always going to be. You mentioned how parents can no longer physically discipline a child, and for right or wrong, that is certainly made very clear for us to know that that is something that's not allowed, so to speak, as a parent. And I'm wondering whether this, parents being, I guess, less involved, is that the way to put it, Peter? With a child's upbringing lies more on the government, the state, the school.
But yeah, well, if you look at the average family, I would say in Australia, your average family, you have both parents working, so that means any children either going to school or being looked after by daycare. If they're lucky, they might have someone in the family that can look after the children. And by that I mean grandparents, aunties, uncles, someone that can help. But chances are they don't, so they're sending their kids off to daycare, which is again government subsidized. So that means they're relying on the government for that. Then when the kids go to school, obviously they're relying on the government for that, because education is government funded in most schools. And so obviously that goes all the way until they turn into an adult, because by the time they graduate year 12, they're an adult at that stage.
It's very interesting, isn't it? Because the family nucleus and it's where parents sit and what they can and cannot do has changed, evolved, has grown, and it's a very interesting area because you can go, that's the reason why I raised it, is this could be an area too where parents are censored out certain information about their child. That was raised in America
Yeah.
as
And
an
they kind of already are as well, because they can't even make a choice. Like, according with this new legislation coming in now, they can't even decide whether or not they allow their children to use that. It's just a blanket ban. You cannot use it. But what happens if the parents want their kids to use it?
Okay, what about where a child seeks counselling? They can stop a parent from knowing they're getting cancer.
Yeah, because that's different to a medical issue.
But for right or wrong, there are
Yeah.
cases where it makes sense. It really does make sense where parents are kept away from the information for very good reasons, of course. But would all parents be happy with that, you think?
Well, say for example, say if a child's receiving counseling, right, and that's withheld from a parent, I could understand the parent's point of view of being upset with that, because sometimes, especially as your kids start to get older, they might feel like they can't speak with their parents but really want to speak with their parents. And sometimes, seeking counsel from someone else and then them passing it on to the parents is a massive benefit. But if that's being restricted because it's supposed to be in confidence, that's then censoring out the parents from the child.
Yeah, I'm just bringing these up, and it's very important for the listeners to realise as examples of other forms of censorship or information being withheld. There are many examples. It's very unfair of us and unkind of us if we left it purely to look at it at a government level. It can be at an institutional level, because in New South Wales, schools generally do require parental consent for a student to be engaged with counselling services. Obviously, unless there's a legal obligation to hack without. Could be as a case of health, safety, welfare, or even wellbeing risks, or even child protection. We must remember that
Yeah.
concern.
Yep,
And
exactly.
mandatory reporting required. So everything does have exceptions to the rules, but what we're hoping in our heart of hearts from today's episode is that when we talk about censorship, obviously we're talking about greater power in the hands of others to decide what they feel should be blocked or shielded or protect, if that's the word to use, protecting us from. There is no doubt that the Australian Labor Party, led under Albanese, come from a good place, a good heart of what they're trying to achieve, which is, of course, the protection of young children from terrible things that are out there online. And that was mentioned. That was at the centre and at the heart of this week, Albanese getting up and speaking. You can't dismiss that and disrespect that point. It is true. It is sad. There are young children, because of online bullying, because of inappropriate material, there's been loss of life.
Yeah.
We can't dismiss that. But it is a dangerous area when the government steps in and intervenes because of what we're saying. We're relying on trust, aren't we? But equally, what makes it very difficult and challenging is that a lot more trust is placed on young people. Let me elaborate further on this. Once upon a time, Peter, the worst thing you could do inappropriately in terms of what you view or consume was your mate bringing a dirty magazine to school, or another friend bringing cigarettes to school. Or maybe being challenged to steal a chocolate bar from a corner store. Now I'm talking about misdemeanors that obviously wouldn't result in going to jail. Certainly stealing a chocolate bar, you could obviously get a police record even. But I'm trying to highlight that what's changed since then is that all of a sudden young children these days can really, really do some damage for the rest of their life, online that is. Because young children, like we did, make mistakes. But unfortunately, their mistakes online, where they could be mean, and no one's perfect when they're young, could be mean and not thinking about it, could lead to destroying their lives or destroying someone else's life. They have all this extra power now, young people, with this amazing computer, and it is a computer. People dismiss that we take it for granted, the phone, the amount of processing power, don't we, Peter? That's in our hand. The
Yep.
ability to take these high resolution photos. We can even manipulate them with AI. And that's happened, by the way, with young people as well now. That's another layer of concern. AI images of people being sent out there. All of a sudden, there's all these wretched, powerful tools. And remember, we know that the frontal lobe of males is that right? Doesn't develop till the early 20s. Is that what it
Yep.
is, Peter?
Yeah, yeah. It's later in life, especially when you compare it to females.
So they're going to risk take. And I guess where Albanese is coming from, the government is coming from, and we can all acknowledge that we're in uncharted territories as human beings.
Yeah, I think the best way to sum everything that we've actually spoken about today is with the common idiom of the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
I'll elaborate further because I'm struggling with that one, to be quite honest, Peter. I'm pretty slow, of course.
Okay, so basically, it's a saying, um, uh, in relation to you approach everything with the best intentions of I intend to clean up.
Yeah, okay.
So in the example here, I intend to
Yes,
clean up how kids use the internet.
leads to hell.
Exactly. No, that's the good intention, right?
Yeah,
Cleaning
yeah,
up the
yeah.
internet. But reaching hell is you get there by that good intention because it puts another paver down on the way to hell because it allows for other things to happen.
Yeah, the long-term impact of it.
Exactly.
That's what today has been about. It's so true. I'm glad you elaborated that way because that's where we are, aren't we? We're concerned where all these pavers are going to, if that's the metaphor to use, are going to lead to.
Exactly.
Because we're relying on a lot of trust. I don't think single human beings have had so much power in human history. Think about it. How many people does Facebook reach out to?
Billions.
So, yes. So think about the wrong policies, the wrong views, the wrong controls in that space alone, the influence and corruption it would have on billions of people, possibly. That's pretty powerful when you think of it that way, isn't it, Peter?
Yeah. And that's why it's very important that things are done the right way. But it's it's hard to know what the right way is, though.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one about these powerful people because you look at AI and some of the areas I've been reading in that area and the AI ChatGPT founder, what's his name, Altman, is it? Let me get his name up actually. He's
Yeah,
been
I wouldn't know his
Sam
name.
Altman. That's his Sam Altman. Now, what's interesting about that character, if you read a bit about him, is that he was obviously co-founded in 2015 by a group of prominent figures, which included himself and others. Okay. Now, what is a bit scary about him was he stepped down, or did he get temporarily sacked? Don't worry, we're relying on our.
Was he like co-CEO with someone else?
Yeah, he was temporarily sacked or fired actually on November 2023. He's back in that position
Yeah, wow.
within days, an intense negotiation, and there was a threat of a massive resignation from a large number of other OpenAI employees. So he was reinstated as CEO with a newly structured board.
Well, just I guess to elaborate to listeners, the only way a CEO can get sacked is if the board votes unanimously to sack him that's prematurely. Obviously, they're on contract.
Hence why I was laughing. A newly structured board.
Yes. So that's just to I guess to elaborate that joke
Yeah.
for all of the listeners.
Yeah, because I mean, he might be the world's most wonderful man, Sam Altman. I only know about Sam Altman from what I've read or viewed out there. So but I guess there's flags, red flags as they call them, that are out there when you consider that this is a person with a lot of power at the moment. Is he the right person?
Yep. Okay.
Because we know where AI is going. It's going to places that are, well, you look at all the videos now, the AI videos, they're getting scary, Peter.
Yeah. What they can do. I don't know if you ever scroll on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube Shorts, but you see like
Yes,
all
yes.
these kind of selfie positions of made up actors. So there's one that I've seen that's a gorilla and he's doing all silly
Yeah,
things.
they're funny those ones.
Yeah, and but you know that it's fake because there's no such thing as a talking gorilla, right? But if you were a being from Alpha Centauri that just arrived and was receiving that information on your device, you would believe that gorillas could talk because it looks that believable.
Yeah, well, this is just it, isn't it? Well, I mean, this is another area in itself. Actually, interesting about that was, do you remember about 12 to 18 months ago, there was big laws that were passed, I think in Australia and many other countries, with regards to deep fakes.
Yeah, I heard something vague about that. Yeah.
So basically, there was a lot of celebrities, obviously, that were being deep faked, particularly in the space of inappropriate material and footage, and putting them in that footage. So obviously, then that was made an issue. And I'm actually looking it up as we speak now. And I can give more information for our listeners in this. This was released, the Amendment Deepfake Sexual Material Act 2024 which commenced in September 2024. So it was enacted fairly quickly because we could see, everyone could see where this was going to go. Now, that's a good example, in my opinion, of strong, heavy handed government that worked really well there. It's because we need to present that balanced view. We sound like we've got to be careful here that we're anti-government in everything they're doing. When we spoke about COVID before, but this is a really good example where the government and the right authorities acted accordingly, because what this meant, that the act introduced a new standalone federal criminal, this is in Australia, criminal offences for the non-consensual sharing of sexually explicit material online, explicitly including material created or altered using AI technology, deepfakes. Offences, maximum penalty of up to 6 years.
Yeah. Wow.
And it also went deeper in terms of, there's one amazing area we should be proud of in Australia. That's the e-safety. I'm a really big fan of that space, because we're one of the very few countries. Do you realise that young people, and they've told in schools, that they can click on e-safety and immediately get help if something happens or they witness or experience online? Did you know that, Peter? Yeah, it's straight on the e, and that's an advertisement for everyone in Australia and parents to know that. Go to the eSafety website, okay? And I'll just note that right now. I think it's very important that parents know that. The eSafety website, I could have just looked it up, but it's obviously, and I knew it, and I should have just got it.
eSafety.gov.
Yeah, that's it. That's where it provides it. It's a wonderful site. It does provide a lot of advice and resources, but where it stands out as a nation, and it's something we should be proud of, that complaint service. There's a complaint service online.
Report abuse.
Yeah, yeah.
Top right of the screen.
Yeah, it's very clear, and it is mentioned in schools a lot. So we've got to be fair and balanced here. There are so many areas where censorship or control or ownership by the government in terms of a direction has worked extremely well. But we do want to have that disclaimer, like you said, about those pavers, yeah, that we don't want to end up going down a path or a road where we come back. I love that little bit in, and we've said it in many episodes. I think that's the pinnacle of our belief system for both of us, Peter, in many ways, is that in that Star Wars Phantom is a Phantom Menace or Attack of the Clones, where they say, and Liberty dies now because what was it?
Attack of the Clones.
Attack of the Clones. What did I say? Declare emergency power. Yeah, is that right?
Yeah.
That's what happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mentioned that example, and why we say that's very important, because that's a good example of how power can be manipulated. True, Peter?
Yes.
By
Yeah.
government.
And that is, I guess, the most common way in history that power was abused as well.
You don't want a government coming in and saying, oh, no, I have to do this. In fact, we should, in many ways, look at, and they were leaning on the right of government, and that was the Morrison government. So I'm trying to show here that we're not right or left on this show at all. But because I might have sounded like we were anti-left in this episode, But if you look at the Scott Morrison government, during COVID, he decided to give himself some extra portfolios, didn't he?
Yeah, yeah, I think he took over the roles of a lot of the ministers that he had in cabinet.
Yeah, and that's that's scary. Do you not consider that scary, Peter? When you have a lead all of a sudden say, "No, no, I'll handle that. I'll handle this. I'll handle the health. I'll handle the money. I'll handle all these other areas."
It's scary if the like when you look at like that the party themselves that have formed the government doesn't trust the people around them, and that's what that is, a lack of trust.
Yeah, but he equally appointed himself to the portfolios. This is between May 2021. The portfolios of health, finance, industry, science, energy, resources, home affairs, and treasury. That's pretty scary stuff.
Yeah,
They gave him shared legal authority and decision making powers over these areas. And this was done without the knowledge of existing ministers, by the way, or even the public.
yep.
He claimed, and I'm quoting this sounds like an episode out of that Attack of the Clones. Scott Morrison claimed at the time he took this because he required extraordinary measures as a safeguard.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? It's interesting that you bring that up because I thought of it in exactly the same way when the news was airing about that, and I was what I actually found it interesting about that, rather than I guess the news outlets broadcasting it as kind of like a affront to democracy, they kind of like they approached it in a light manner, like you know, like as if he was a bumbling buffoon.
No, pretty scary.
Yeah, well, but it was actually pretty scary in what actually happened there.
I'm surprised he wasn't put up to go to jail. I'm being serious about that. Obviously, I'm getting dramatic possibly in this, and people would laugh at me saying that. But to think that he did this secretly, that's against the very fabric of democracy, in my opinion. What he did.
Yeah, but see, I would argue that there's provisions probably in the
Yeah,
Constitution and law that he
yeah,
enacted for emergency powers and stuff. So really,
yeah.
really, he did nothing wrong besides what he morally did wrong.
Morally, you're right. You're right.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's why I'm getting rather dramatic because of the ethical and moral dilemma, and also the how easily a government can slip down a very scary authoritarian state, can it? It isn't as difficult as we want to believe. We sometimes naively think having in Australia the House of Reps and the Senate that we are protected in terms of extraordinary things occurring, e.g., laws or bills being passed that
it,
would
it's
destroy the very fabric of our democratic government.
it's funny that you say that. We're going to be entering a period where Labor will have control of both the lower and upper houses.
And that's why censorship is part of this conversation, because we want our media, and today we are holding them to the account in saying that we want them to be balanced because we want elections to be tight. We want, and I'll use for lack of better words, we need to keep the bastards honest.
Yeah,
It's very important that this occurs because you can't, whether it be completely on the left or completely on the right, you can't have that occur. You need that balanced viewpoints. You need that opportunity for people to present for and against any massive change or interruption that's going to occur. And that's where we worry about. It's very easy. We've seen it happen too many times in recent times where a government can take or use this slant on requiring extraordinary measures. I'll keep going back to that COVID example because there were many examples, e.g., I would say what the government was right if it was consistent, Peter, across all states, but it wasn't. So that tells me that they were dictating terms under what they were being fed by their experts, and that's scary.
yeah. Well, what's scary is that the experts had it different in each state.
Yes.
But the way that I mean, the way that each state handled things, that was always going to be a state-based solution because when it comes to health, the federal government has no say.
Yes, but what's scary about it is that if it was done in a very fair way, you would think that it would have been consistent, the measures across every state. What I'm trying to say is it was a very grey area.
Yeah,
and they
You
milked it, some of them.
Yeah, you can counter it though because each state has unique circumstances.
Okay,
So,
all right, point taken.
like say for example, if a state's
Mm,
bankrupt, for example, they don't have the funding to be able to enact some, extra say extra shifts for the police to be able to
yeah,
police some of these measures. So they have to be a little bit
or
lax
even
in
hospital care.
exactly or hospital care.
Yeah,
So
point
you got
taken.
to yeah, so they have to do things that minimize the cost, right?
Yeah, I never
So
thought of it
some
that way. That's so true.
and this is going back. This is why sometimes even what the government presents is misinformation, not because they intentionally want to misinform people. It's they don't want to overload systems that in positions that can't be overloaded. So it's not about we're giving you the best health advice. It comes back to more we're giving you the best advice so that way then this can be as smooth as possible. And that's where, like, sometimes you have to read between the lines, and it can be hard because you don't know what the approach is. Like, why is it being said this way when facts show another way, right? And I guess a good example of that is when especially when they said that the vaccines, as soon as you get vaccinated you can't spread the
Yes.
virus or you
Yeah.
can't catch the virus. Like I don't have any education when it comes to virology or the study of viruses, but I know that you can't immunize yourself to be 100% immune to a
Exactly.
virus,
That's right.
right? And that's basic knowledge. So that means regardless if you get immunized or not, you still have a chance of obtaining that virus. So, and that's with my rudimentary knowledge. So let alone, so for me, I already knew that the advice given was for another reason, not so much the reason that they were presenting at
So
the
they
time.
lied because they needed to serve that agenda, which was in the best interest of the public.
And the government, like at the end of the day, like if hospitals are flooded with
Yeah. Yeah.
people suffering, there's an even greater chance for more hospital staff to become ill as well with the viruses. Um, and when those people fall sick, there's less people to care. So then you start losing staff, and you get in a position where you're overwhelmed, and everything grinds to a halt when it comes to just health treatment. Let alone then I guess policing and emergency response. The same thing happens there, and then you don't have anyone, maintaining basic laws in the state, and essentially, society crumbles for that period while everyone's sick.
And the good news is that after that, because of the brave and fine work of these first responders, they were given amazing pay benefits.
Yes, yeah.
For our listeners, that was a joke and me being sarcastic. On that note, however, I think we've had a really interesting conversation. We can see even by what you said there, and I appreciate that, Peter, where you certainly had me corrected in my view there, I would say, or something I learnt there, that it isn't a straightforward topic. Censorship. That censorship requires trust of the government, and hoping that they're doing it in the right spirit and that there aren't extraordinary measures made. But it's been a great conversation, Peter. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, likewise, I've enjoyed it as well, and I've said it before in this podcast. I'll say it again. The road to hell is paved in good intentions.
And don't forget, our listeners, to subscribe. We haven't been saying that at all, but I think we should be urging our listeners to subscribe, because we try to release an episode every few days. Because my name is Robert, and with me is
Peter.
and together we have our little podcast here called Bo Peep. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.